Well, hello, everybody. This is Dan back with my buddy Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hey guys.
Um, Chris and I don't really recognize each other because life just has been busy lately. But we've been trying to get back on here and do some more talking, and we're glad it worked out today. So we're excited
Yes.
that we're back on Facebook Live again. We figured all that technology out, and it's just good to be back. So I'm gonna kick it right to Chris. Um, Chris, why don't you start off just for anybody that's new that's listening, and since it's been a while, just tell what are we doing here, first of all? Why are you and I here talking?
Yeah, first off, if you're just listening for the first time, thanks. Dan has been a great mentor to me, and we first met actually in a Facebook group after I had lost my son Mason, and Dan had lost his son Jameson a year before, and Dan just kind of guided me through those first couple months, and it's just evolved into a friendship. And at one point we said, hey, let's just do a podcast and talk about what we're feeling, because there really weren't that many dad podcasts out there about grief. There is now. It seems like as we've started doing this, I've seen more and more, which is awesome. I'd rather dads be talking than not. And we give dads a chance to speak their mind after they've lost their child, and just get their feelings and emotions out there, and give advice to other people who maybe aren't dealing with the loss but have questions about how to help people going through grief, or just any kind of questions that come up at us. So that's the basic gist of why Dan and I do this. Started off as a way for us to clear our minds, and then as we kept doing it, we started helping others. That felt pretty good, and we wanted to keep rolling with it. So did I miss anything there, Dan?
No, you hit it. I value Chris's friendship tremendously. Yeah, I don't remember which came first, the friendship or the support. I guess it had to have been the support. Um, just I
It
need
kind of all evolved together at the same time, to be honest.
Yeah,
And of course,
and I feel
our
like the more and more I talk to people who are grieving, we're all craving that relationship, that person that we can confide in and just good through the good, the bad, and the ugly.
yeah,
And yeah, that's what Chris is for me. This man is my best friend at this point in my life, and I can tell him anything at any time, and he'll listen, and he'll respond in an appropriate way. So I'm thankful
yeah,
for that.
yeah.
So
We have that awesome friendship where we can pretty much tell each other anything, and we can also kind of smack each other and be like, "Dude, come on, what are you thinking there?"
yeah,
Like, and sometimes I need that. Sometimes I need Dan to be like, "Hey, have you thought of it like this?" And then I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess that does make sense." So that's what great friendships are about. I love Dan. I love his family, and we actually finally got to meet this summer, which was awesome, and hopefully more coming up in the future. So
yeah,
with his grief retreat, and we're trying to plan a whole. We're big Buffalo fans in terms of sports. I live back here in Buffalo now. We're trying to plan. We'll probably get it next year for sure, a Buffalo Bandits, a Buffalo Bills, and a Buffalo Sabres game all in one weekend. That's our goal next year. We'll see if we can make that work.
Well, there's one Chris, I'm not embarrassed to do a shameless request, plug, whatever you want to call it. It happens, just so happens, when the Bills were winning last night at the end of the game. I looked it up, and the Bandits are home Friday night, the Sabres Saturday, and the Bills on Sunday. So if any of our listeners happen to have four or five, $6,000 laying around that you don't need, I need to buy a plane ticket, and then Chris and I both need to buy tickets to all the games and parking and food and all that. So if anybody wants, we just can't afford it all with football playoff tickets and stuff. So
Well,
if
yeah,
if anybody's got it laying around, Chris and I have a great idea of how you can spend that money.
go Bills.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Uh,
so yeah, Chris and I have been talking. We've been doing this show for. This is our gosh, what is it, Chris? Three or four? Third season or four?
Third,
Third
right?
season, and we feel like we've talked about pretty much everything that's been on our heart. But we keep talking too as we do more and more shows. Things change. Our grief evolves. We evolve. But then also we make new connections with people. So we're going to actually kind of backtrack today and through the next few episodes and just kind of revisit old topics. But before we dive into this week's topic, I want to just ask Chris too. Last time, if you listened to our episode, Chris's life lately has been a little crazy with job changes and moves and all that. And Chris, let's just check in with that. Where are you just in terms of life, and how's that affecting your grief?
Yeah, I mean, I think things are calming down a little bit, I will say. So I've got out of the military this summer. It's a huge transition. It's a huge change. I served 22 years in the military, and that's all I knew as an adult. I joined right at 18. So basically, I'm learning how to be a civilian, which you would think would be easy, but it's actually very different. And I can see why so many veterans really struggle with this topic of transitioning out of the military and that lifestyle. It's so different. So I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of it. Starting to understand the new lifestyle, the new way of living. Think I got a pretty decent grasp on my job now. I don't want to say it's a perfect world, but I'm getting there in the sense of it's getting better. It still feels weird though. I mean, like if you're listening and you were in the military, or even if you're still in the military and you're listening, there's days I still feel like I'm just on leave. Like I still feel like I'm just visiting Buffalo and this isn't my home yet. I'm hoping with time that'll pass. But I want to say I really want to join a veterans group up here. I just haven't had the opportunity. But I really do want to join a veterans group and be able to, hang out with some other veterans, because it is just a different lifestyle. And I'm not going to lie and say that I don't miss it, because I do. I miss my old life at times. That's not saying I'm not grateful or happy for what I have right now, because I definitely am. But I definitely feel like I reminisce a whole lot more than I used to, in terms of just my job and life in general. So overall, though, things are good, progressing well, and I am, happy to be on track and at a point now where Dan and I could do these again. We tried one and it went well, but then life got crazy again really quick, and Dan knows all that. I won't get into details there, but got really crazy, and I just couldn't keep up with it all. So thanks again for all those that are back listening, and hopefully this will be on a better battle rhythm going forward in terms of scheduling and whatnot.
I think you just highlighted one of the key points in grief too, is that I think we both have met through our journeys a lot of people who have started foundations trying to do something to turn our losses into some sort of positive impact, legacy of our children, things like that. And it's all that's wonderful, but at the same time, we need that balance where this podcast gives me so much help. Just being able to talk to Chris. Nothing else, just talking to Chris. He's my therapist, and he has really good hourly rates. But he's the one I can talk to openly about anything, and we all need that. But as much as I love doing this podcast, life gets in the way at times, and we've got, between our job and our family and just whatever else, we got to remember that sometimes we just need to step back and, whether it's grief or life, whatever, do what's necessary for ourselves to remain healthy, and mentally and physically and relationally and just everything. And so just keep that in mind, anybody who's on the journey, that take care of yourself first, because you're no good to anybody else if you're not taking care of yourself. And I think we've talked about it before, as dads, there's a whole element of, we feel like we want to protect our families, and we will protect our families, and a lot of us feel that we failed in that with the loss of our child. And whether it's that motivation, just being a man, whatever, We got to take care of ourselves first so that we can take care of our families and do our jobs first.
Yeah, I mean it's the age. You hear that analogy of being on a plane that's crashing, and they tell you to put your mask on first before you help others with their masks. Like you got to do it sometimes because you're not going to be good to anyone else. You're not going to be able to help them the way you want to, and then you're both failing. And taking that time to take care of yourself is not a selfish thing. It's okay to take that time to get yourself in the right mindset, and go from there in terms of helping others.
Yeah.
Following.
Awesome. Great. Well, so today, the topic we're going to try to focus on, and we'll see where it goes, is just revisiting again an old topic of things that people say, whether they're good or not very helpful. We've discussed it before, and we're just going to revisit it because, again, grief changes, people change, relationships change, and there's also a lot of random interactions that are almost always interesting if they involve discussing our loss and our families. So Chris is going to share a little story about something that's happened to him recently, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, it was very random. I never saw it coming, to be honest with you, because the comment came from someone else that had lost a child, which really threw me for a loop. I just never saw it coming. I was at someone's house recently, and they had lost their adult child. I want to say maybe mid 30s to 40s, somewhere around there. Not sure exactly the age or the circumstances of the death. But the person happened to make a comment at one point and said something of the sorts of basically, because they had their child longer than me, that their grief was more intense than my grief. And I mean, I just stood there stone face cold. Like, I could not believe that person said that. I was pretty mad about it overall. I kept my composure though. I didn't say anything back. I had to think about those early months of that I went through, and how you're just not thinking rationally anymore. It's very different. Now, that's not to say what they said was appropriate. It definitely wasn't appropriate. It was not the right thing to say. I was definitely angry about it. I give them a little reprieve because it was so early in their grief, that they just weren't thinking straight, and that's probably the only reason why I didn't say a word to them. But yeah, I mean, that one kind of hurt, to me at least, because here I really thought this person understood. Typically bereaved parents, we all have this common understanding of how much the loss hurts. So to think for some reason that your loss was greater than my loss, because my child was 7 and your child was in their 30s, it didn't make any sense to me. So very difficult moment. I kept my cool, kept my composure, got out of there really fast before I did break down and say something. And yeah, that's it. I mean, I actually messaged Dan about it that day. I was like, you're not going to believe what someone said to me. Yeah, really tough. So.
Well, first of all, I'm proud of you for how you handled that, because I think everybody would agree that it's really hard to hear some of the things that people say and not respond. So good job on that. I don't know if I would have had that self-control. You're more mature than I am.
I already knew that, yeah.
But there's 2 things that you mentioned in there that I think are good to expand on. First of all, comparing grief. What are your thoughts on that? Of comparing whether it's an adult versus a child, a toddler child versus a newborn. What are your thoughts on comparing people's grief?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard because I'm not going to be honest. I've done it myself, and I know it's not the right thing to do, but then I have caught myself doing it, and I'll be the first one to admit that I know it was wrong when I did it too. I don't know if there's like a right or wrong answer because this is such a difficult topic. It's kind of like what we talked about earlier. You do what you got to do to get through those difficult moments. You got to do what you got to do to survive. I don't like to typically compare grief because, in my opinion, like in my sane mind right now, where I'm thinking clearly, everybody's grief is intense. It's their own feelings and emotions. But then there's those moments where I have weakness and I hear something about how someone feels about their grief, and I don't know. I'm not going to lie and say that I haven't thought in the past, well, um, I didn't have a choice in how my child died. That person did have a choice in how they died. It's not the right thing. I'm not going to say it's the right thing. In those moments, I had not the best thoughts. So I don't know. What do you think, Dan?
I think I've done it. We've done a whole episode on this, if I remember right. I early on, for the first year, probably two, maybe even going on to 3 years, when I was clinging to anything and everything I could to try to find stuff that helped. And I know I did constantly. God, what if Jameson had died when he was a newborn instead? Is it better? I won't go through all my questions because I don't want to stir up any emotions and things inside other people who may be listening. But I went through a wide range of questions of comparison, and again, through our show, through talking to other dads who have gone through things, I was finally able to. I think I settled that, at least that part of my grief, and I haven't compared for a while. It comes down to the fact that grief is grief. It sucks for everybody who's going through a grief journey. Everybody is different. Everybody's relationships are different. The person that you lost is different. The way that they were lost is different. The memories and the missed out opportunities for a future are different. So there is no way you can compare grief that is healthy. It's
Yeah.
just,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dan.
it's just an easy way, and I am guilty of it for a long time. It's a really easy way that I beat myself up over and over again over something that was completely meaningless. But it was my attempt to just find something to help me on the journey.
I think you bring up some really key points there. Like, as the years have gone on, we're coming up on our 4-year mark of not having Mason with us, and kind of like how you said at the beginning, your thoughts evolve or you mature maybe through your grief. And I will agree with you there. Like, I don't have those feelings anymore like I used to. I definitely don't compare anymore like I used to. I think, like you said, trying to hold on to something. Another thing you said too that's interesting that I didn't think about, but I definitely know I did, was almost like you want to hold on to the pain. You want to feel that pain, that intense pain. I don't know. Sometimes I did. I wanted to feel that intense pain. Like, I wanted to get the cry out. I wanted the tears to flow. And that would be one of the things I would think about, like, why this, why that, why this, why that. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it definitely was a reasoning for me at those moments, in terms of the comparison, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's important with this lady, at least my opinion as an outsider of the situation, is that we're not discounting anybody's grief. Erica and I have talked about this many times, that it's not that your grief isn't intense if you've lost an adult child or a newborn baby, or, again, whatever the grief is. Even going to parents and grandparents, brothers, sisters, whatever. Everybody's grief matters. But I look at it in terms of healing. And again, we have to be selfish. We have to take care of ourselves first. And although I am empathetic to people who have lost adult children, my focus for my own health, and then if I'm healthy enough to try to help other people, my focus is more on kids because that sadly is what I'm an expert at. I lost a 9-year-old boy. And if you've lost a child anywhere from like 7 to 11, I feel like I can sadly provide you a lot of critical information that may help. If you've lost an adult child, I don't know I know some of the pieces of what that's like because grief is grief and there are a lot of similarities, but I can't help you and it's not helping me because, again, there's a difference between a child that um, didn't graduate from elementary school, um, things like that, versus the children that did. They made it through high school, they made it through college, they had a job, they had a family. It's a completely, although it's the same world, it's a completely different world that it doesn't, it's not as helpful for me to have those discussions with those people as it is with somebody like Chris, who, I mean, Mason and Jameson were 2 years apart. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that comes up a whole other bunch of different topics, right? Like finding your circle, finding your people. You're 100% right. I've had people reach out to me and they had, stillborn births. I could do my best to help you walk through the grief, but I don't know that feeling because I didn't have a stillborn birth in my family. So Dan is 100% right. Like, there's no harm in finding your group of people when it comes to grief. People that can have even more sympathy for you. They understand exactly what you are going through. They can give you the advice you need. Dan and I have talked about this before. Like, I even said it at the beginning of the show today, right? Like, Dan was kind of my mentor through this process. He told me, hey, this is what's going to suck. This is what's going to be hard. Here's some things to think about. Stuff that he already went through. There's no shame in anyone going through grief. Finding a support group or a mentor or somebody that has already been through it and they're further along, so they're more, in tune with their emotions. They've worked out a lot of the more difficult grief emotions, and they're kind of more in, like, I don't want to say a stable state, but like a steady state. They're probably not going to get any better, but they're probably not going to get any worse. It is what it is now, and we've come to that conclusion. What do you think, Dan?
I think you're talking about Dennis, and if anybody's those people who have listened to some of our episodes, of Dennis. They're 38, 39 years in on their journey of losing their son Ryan Michael, Dennis and Debbie Jordan, and I'll plug their book right now. If you're on a grief journey, look up on Amazon, Debbie and Dennis Jordan, the Lies That Grief Tell. That's not the exact title, and I'm blanking on it, and I apologize to Debbie and Dennis. But Debbie just wrote a book about her journey 38 years later. But they are the ones that give me hope. And I think Chris has shared, too, the same thing. They're the ones that when you're thrown into a grief journey and you're thinking, I'm never going to survive this, how can I possibly ever get life back under control? You find people like that who they still hurt daily. They still hurt, but they're far enough along that they've adjusted to what life has thrown at them, and they're truly living life again in a way that remembers and honors their son Ryan Michael, but still allows them to grieve because you never get over the loss. And their mentorship to, I think I'm safe in saying, both Chris and myself and our wives has been just wonderfully appreciated and helpful.
Yeah, couldn't be replaced, to be honest. So Debbie's book is called Grief's Deception: Overcoming the 12 Lies Whispered to a Broken Heart. Great book. Definitely check it out on Amazon. We don't typically do that, but Debbie and Dennis have been such guides for us, and they really have given me hope that we can have happy lives even after losing a child, which is so difficult to even say. It doesn't even sound natural saying, but they're the ones that have given me hope that yes, this can actually happen.
Yep. And hope is the key word there. And I don't know if I said it or not, but Chris did. Just we're looking for hope in any way we can possibly get it. And Dennis and Debbie give real hope. Like
Yep.
they've lived it. And they've lived it with a young child. Can they help people who've lost adult children? Absolutely. But it's on many ways it's similar, and on many things it's going to be different, and that's part of the journey. We just got to find the resources and the people that help us with where we are at that time.
Yeah. And, as we're talking about these resources, right? Like there's support groups, there's bereavement groups. Don't be afraid to join a group and then say, this one isn't for me, and leave it. Like there's no, you can do what works for you. Okay. Don't think you have to keep going to that group. I know Dan and I have talked about a couple different Facebook groups, and we're like, yeah, that's not for us. We're not in the let's be miserable forever because there's no hope. That's Dan and I don't want to live that life. We want the hope. We want the future, happiness with our families. So, don't be afraid to even mental health providers, therapists, even a mentor. If you're like, hey, I'm going to try this mentor out, maybe they're willing to help me, and then you're like, yeah, this just wasn't what I thought it would be. Have no fear in saying, thank you for your time. I'm going to try something else. You got to do what's best for you in the long run.
And I actually did that. Erica and I both went separately to a professional therapist pretty early on. And I knew, I say I knew right away after one session that I was going to struggle growing with the therapist in a way that was any different than what I was getting from my pastor and a friend of mine. I had two very close friends who I felt like I could talk about anything to. And so meeting with this therapist, I didn't see, and again, it was after one session, so I know I pulled the plug a little quickly, but I just didn't feel like it was one more thing I needed to take on at that moment. And in hindsight, I have few regrets over that. The one thing that's really hit me the last maybe 6 months or so is that I'm still wrestling with my Christian walk, and then I'm wrestling with, it's all related to the grief, but just a day-to-day feeling of not being joyful and all that, where I feel like I'm actually at a point now where I think a professional would be helpful, because they have all their years of research how do I get out of this particular rut? And it's not, one of my big hang-ups with a therapist too is, again, I wanted one that had lost a child that really could relate. And the ones in my area, generally, they're professionally trained therapists, and one of them had lost a husband. So again, there was a little bit of a connection, but it wasn't what I felt I needed at the time. And so that pushed me away from professionals. But again, I think I am at a stage now I'm kind of looking into professionals just to help with the day-to-day, how do you recover from a trauma, not specifically a necessarily grief or grief of a child. And that's the season that I was in then. It's the season I'm in now, and it's okay. Like Chris said, it's okay to walk away if it's not working, and come back and revisit it later.
Yeah, I was the complete opposite. I thought my therapist helped me right away, early in the beginning, through a whole lot of different emotions topics, even working through EMDR therapy for what I felt was like, PTSD during the loss of Mason and that whole process. So it's going to be different for everyone. I think that's, Dan and I are perfect examples. What worked for him didn't work for me. What works for me didn't work for him. Doesn't mean we're not talking all the time. Doesn't mean we're not supporting each other either. It just means, kind of like we said, you really got to find what works for you. Try a bunch of different things. Try a bunch of different things at the same time.
Yep.
Try a group therapy and an individual therapy. Maybe that'll help. just get out there and try, I guess is the point. Don't just wallow in your sorrow. There is a time for the wallowing, don't get me wrong, but it's not forever. That's my point.
Right. Right. So I've had, I mean, over the last we're approaching 5 years, just, well, a month and a week away, I guess. I've had numerous talks from day one with people, and I just had one last weekend again of our our close friends and family. What do I say? They're constantly asking, what do I say? How do we address Christmas? Um, Chris, what are your thoughts? Again, going back to what we talked about early on in our journeys, what do we recommend to our friends and family and close people who are close in our close networks to say to you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think any holiday is always difficult, especially if you're dealing with children. It could be, a difficult time, and how do you, interact with someone that's going through intense grief? For me, what worked best for me is I want people to talk about Mason. I want them to bring him up. I want him to still be part of the conversation. I don't want people to think he's gone and let's just forget about him. He's an afterthought and we're never thinking about him again or mentioning his name. That does so much more damage to at least me and my family. So, again, kind of like we talked about before, you'll have to see what works best for you. But for me, like, I want Mason's name out there. Mason's name is out there. We still do, a little birthday for Mason every year. His name, he still gets his stocking hung up at Christmas, still put his Easter basket out. We still incorporate him however we can. His picture still comes out in terms of, like, if we're having a major family event, everyone's at the kitchen table. We put a picture of Mason right there at the kitchen table. That's what we like to do. So, what do you guys do, Dan?
I agree with that completely. Just don't forget Jameson. And that's where I feel like we are with a lot of people. Like, whether it's a holiday or just a regular everyday occurrence, if we go through it, and again, I'm focusing on Christmas just because we just had Christmas, but when people say Merry Christmas, we hope that Dan, Erica, and Reese have a great Christmas. That hurts. You're forgetting somebody, and I don't want to say I understand because I don't understand your side of things, but I hear you that you're not sure what to say. Say our kids' names. They're a part of our family, and they're living somewhere else, but they're still a part of our family. And I had somebody mention to either Erica or Reese just a couple weeks ago that, man, you wear a lot of Jameson Joy shirts. Yeah, because it has my boy's name on it, and it helps us not forget, and it helps other people not forget. Say his name, include him. Anytime you're wishing anything for our family, include him. Ask questions about him. Ask for memories of him. Just one of the many greatest worries that I have as a grieving father is, again, forgetting my son being forgotten. And I will do everything I can to keep his name out there, and I give everybody permission to do the same thing. With that, is there a risk that you're going to say something or ask something that hurts? Yes, guaranteed. The pain of Jameson being forgotten and ignored is much greater than the pain of anything you could say. Nothing. Our kids passed away. There is no pain that could be any worse. You're not going to top that, no matter what you say or do. If you are one of our people in our close, tight network, and you say something that's doesn't come out right, what I ask is that you give us permission to just address it with you, address the pain, address the anger, whatever the emotion is. but I am very confident saying that we will forgive you. We will forget about it very quickly. Yes, it will hurt. But if you, and somebody did that just last week with me, they said something and they knew it immediately. And I'm like, you know what? You're okay because it's the bank account we've talked about before. You have walked so closely with us and you've said so many things that are helpful that you know what? This one didn't hurt coming from you because you've built up that bank account of support and love and you're good. And for those that, if it's not that as easy to forgive what you said, I mean, we'll get over it. We'll deal with it. We're used to it. But take the risk to keep talking about our kids, even if you're not sure.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah, the bank account matters. And to be honest, like in terms of family and friends, like it's a cultural shift, right? You'll have to make it's a cultural change of what your family norms are. And with time, those little comments and unknowns will go away, right? New norms will be formed. Now, like every time we get a card, Mason's name is always in the card. People know we always sign Mason's name to the card, things like that. New norms will be built, and then it won't be so difficult. So, don't be afraid that to speak your mind and say what you would prefer. It's going to make everybody feel more comfortable in the long run.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just had a thought and it completely jumped out of my head as quickly as it jumped in. So, oh well.
Oh man.
I know. It was one of my best ones ever too. So,
Gosh.
yeah. Um, what do you think, Chris, about? Oh, what it was my sister actually asked me just right after Christmas, and she's been absolutely wonderful the whole time. But she asked me basically, yeah, what do you want us to say or not say? And like, how do we address Christmas or Jameson's birthday, Father's Day? And I've said it before, I would love to never in my life hear the words Happy Father's Day again. It's just, at this stage, still 5 years in, those words just don't please me.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear the words, I'm sorry, this sucks, I know that today is hard. Something like that, just something to acknowledge that this big special holiday is different in a very major way for you. And it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Probably less is more, but just that acknowledgement that, you know what, this is Christmas, the best holiday of the year for many people. And I know there's a hole at your house.
Yep.
I'm sorry. And leave it at that. I don't think an apology or something like that is going to almost ever be received in a way that's not appreciated.
Yeah, I would agree. I would think, the simple acknowledgement that it's a tough time, that's all that's really needed. It doesn't have to be a deep conversation. It could be a one or two line, saying, and that's it. I'll probably say appreciate it. I really do actually. And then just move on with, whatever's going on. So, yeah, and everybody's different. I'll definitely say that like Father's Day definitely doesn't have the same nostalgia that it used to. But if the kids and my wife want to do something, I'm not gonna tell them. I typically don't say no. I'm not doing that. That's just me. That's how I am. So just like we've said this whole episode, find what works best for you and move forward through it. So
Absolutely. And yeah, for Father's Day, if you're, or whatever it is, again, if you're looking for something, like, just ask. I mean, Erica has been wonderful of what do you want to do for your birthday? What do you want to do for Father's Day? And she leaves it in my court. And so again, what I want to do today could be different than what I want to do tomorrow. It's a day by day thing. But there's there's no way that we can tell you any of those answers because they're different for everybody, and they change. At least for me, they change daily, maybe even hourly. Um, but just the fact that you're acknowledging that it's different is huge.
I agree. I agree 100%. That's the best thing to do. Acknowledgement, and don't be afraid to have some fun too. Don't act all tippy toe around me. Like,
Mhm.
don't act like I'm contagious. Just because I lost my son, doesn't mean you're going to lose your kid. It's circumstantial. So, the tippy toe walk around, making it awkward for everyone. I'm still just a normal person, just going through something a little different, but no need to tippy toe. You can acknowledge it, and then we move on and we have fun, like, the meaning of the party or whatever is going on. So, and that's it.
And that's actually a great point. I've never actually thought about it. It is kind of an icebreaker of, yeah, just get that acknowledgement out of the way. And we don't want to be bringing down the whole party or whatever the event is. Just, yeah, that quick little acknowledgement at the beginning. And again, we've talked about it before where just understand that if something happens, we may have to step out, we may have to leave unannounced. It's nothing personal against you or your party or whatever it is. Just realize that something happened that triggered us and we need some time to get away. Um, it's not something that you need to necessarily worry about of like, what did I do wrong and all that. Just
Yeah.
it's us taking care of ourselves, and it's needed for us, and it's very often nothing that you did wrong.
Yeah. I'll say that happened more to me at the beginning than it does now. Now
Yeah.
I seem to handle pretty much almost every occasion pretty well. I can control my thoughts, and just like the issue I had with that other person earlier, I can control it way better now than early on.
Yeah. Chris, when Mason first passed, did you ask yourself many times, how am I ever going to get through this?
Oh yeah, all the time, multiple times throughout every single day. Yeah, I never in a million years thought I'd be where I'm at right now. You don't think you can actually take that next breath or that next step, and then you do, and then you take another, and then you take another, and then you know as time goes on, you get a little bit stronger. Doesn't take the pain away just because you're getting stronger from it, but you're able to deal with the pain a lot better. And yeah, I didn't think I would make it. I don't think anybody ever thinks they'll make it, but it's definitely possible. I'm assuming you went through the same thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, just as we're talking, I think about that of I don't know a single person in the hundreds of people I've talked to have lost a child that didn't say, didn't ask themselves, how am I ever going to make it through this? And yeah, when you're on day 1, day 30, month 6, year 1, yeah, you're in the deepest, darkest valley with no, I mean, you're not seeing any light through the under the end of the tunnel, at least the people I've talked to. Um,
Yeah.
Chris and I can both say, yes, it's not easy. It's not easier. We're used to it. You learn to adjust your life around it, and I think Chris and I have both done so in a fairly positive way. Of yeah, we're keeping our sons alive, but we're still dealing with our grief. But it is much. We're used to it, so you do learn to function again and get through things as time comes, and just keep that faith, keep that hope. That again,
Yep.
look at Dennis and Debbie. Um, you'll get through it. It's not easy,
Yep.
but you will get through it.
I agree.
So, well, I don't know that I have anything else. You have anything else?
No, it's great to be back, and stay tuned, obviously, for our next one. Dan and I will come up with a good schedule, and probably won't do every week, but we'll make sure it's often enough. And we will get back to getting some guests on too, because I've had people reach out to me saying, "Hey, are you guys doing that again? Really want to come on and tell my story," and we love that, so we want to do that again.
Absolutely. With the Facebook Live going, man, again, we've said it before. We would love interaction. If you're watching live, um, shoot us some messages or comments, whatever. And I mean, we can take questions live. I mean, we welcome anybody. If you're grieving, if you're a therapist, professional of any kind that has some wisdom you want to offer, um, if you're just somebody that's walking alongside somebody that's grieving, and you want to come on and talk, we would. I mean, we just want to help everybody we possibly can. We'll talk to anybody that wants to. So, so I guess with that, again, if you need help, if you want to talk, please reach out. Shoot us. We're both on Facebook at our Miles for Mason and Jameson's Joy page on Facebook. Both of us have our websites up. My email is info@jamesonsjoy.org. Chris's is
info@milesformasonmemorial.com.
and we're here. We're here for you for whatever you need. If we can't help you, we'll use our resources to try to find the right people that will. The important thing though is just find somebody. Just find somebody. And I just did see a comment pop through that helps me. My sister just wrote, she tried to comment and it booted her out. Sometimes you just have to let it be. But I'll make sure I follow up with her and see what her comments is. But again, she's been wonderful through the whole thing. But just find somebody to talk to or somebody you can listen to. So, Chris, I'll let you close it out. Any final thoughts? And
Yeah, final thoughts is, find a friend, find somebody that you can be with. Don't do this alone. And it might not be your spouse. Your spouse is probably going through their own grief. It might be your spouse, so don't be, lean into it either way, whatever works best for the both of you. Yeah, with that, thank you again for listening. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks for allowing me and Dan to just mumble away up here, and we look forward to having everyone listen again to A Father's Love, Healing Through Heartache. Thanks, everyone.
thanks.